When we talk about boundaries around your time, it's not so much the delegation, like what goes off your plate, but it's what stays in your plate and what stays in a frame. You are setting a frame and you are requiring people to operate within your frame. And that is very challenging for a lot of people because a lot of people are, I want my problem solved now. You want to be the person that everyone goes to, calls for, involves, etc. But what ends up happening in that scenario is your time then becomes everyone else's time. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast, where on today's episode, we are going to talk about avoiding burnout as a law firm CEO. All right, so I am happy to talk about this topic. We have talked about burnout before on the podcast. However, one of the things that I think is inherently different from being a law firm practitioner who owns a law firm or becoming a business owner who owns a law firm, right? The next progression in the step, all the way over to being a law firm CEO. I think burnout looks different and feels different at different stages, right? So I think it's not hard to figure out, by and large, what burnout is. I think there's a lot of talking about it, and people will say things like, oh, I just don't want to get out of bed in the morning. I'm listless. I'm tired. I'm frustrated. I'm cranky. You know, you can kind of define it for yourself pretty easily. But I think one of the things that becomes challenging is that a lot of the strategic approach to dealing with burnout when we get to the CEO stage is in creating a life that is burnout free. Because if you have a reactive stance, your stance being, oh my God, I have too much to do. Let me quickly get some things off my plate. Or, oh my God, I'm feeling tired of my clients. Let me go out and get new clients. What you're going to find at the CEO level is that there is always going to be a wealth of opportunity, right? And when I say a lot of things to do, I am talking about opportunity, right? You want to be in a state as a CEO where you are driving opportunity to yourself at all times, to yourself and to your teams and to other people that are connected to you. That is what will make you successful. The more people you serve, the more money you make. So you don't want to lose the opportunity, but you want to get really, really good at creating a systemic approach to crushing chaos in your life, okay? And by the way, for those of you that follow me on social media, you already know this, but I am very proud to share with you guys here on the podcast that the book, Crushing Chaos, The Law Firm Owner's Guide to More Money, More Free Time, and Less Stress is going to be coming out in 2026. The major project has been completed. I am in the process now of working with my editor, and the book is going to make its debut actually on my birthday, which is March 12th. So stay tuned for more on that. But I'm mentioning that now because Crushing Chaos is about creating a systemic approach to being a law firm CEO. That is the purpose of Crushing Chaos. That is what it's all about. That's what I've been talking about since we launched Law Firm Mentor in January of 2018. That is the pillar and the foundation of my speaking consultancy, Allison Speaks, which is a global brand dedicated to crushing chaos. And so for those of you that have been following us for any length of time, you know that that's what we're about here. But if you're new to the podcast, I wanted to introduce this concept, and I want to talk about the burnout avoidance plan. I like to think of it as just that, burnout avoidance, because I don't want us to get into the habit of thinking that when we experience burnout, we have to go deal with it. Our goal is to be perpetually recreating and fine-tuning the lives that we have created and the businesses that we have created in a way that we avoid ever getting to burnout, okay? Now, for those of you that have been followers of the podcast for a while, you know that this is one of these topics that hits very close to home because it was a very challenging year for me over the last few years. In 2023, I had 17 funerals, one of whom was my father. So I laid my father to rest. 2024, I thought, all right, got through that year. Now this is going to be my year. And that year involved a lot of moves. It involved a lot of question marks over my health. So there was just kind of a lot of scatter going on. And then at the early part of 2025, I was like, all right, this is it. This is my year. 2025 is it. And I had experienced more growth in my law firm than I had intended. I wanted to sustain the company and grow to the extent that I can continue to pay people well and continue to do great work. But I wasn't like on a, let's go, scale the law firm further. I was creating multiple companies and a whole host of things were going on in my life. But 2025, we are still in 2025, but 2025 kicked off with a whole lot of medical issues. And it also kicked off with the very sudden tragic death of my mother. So without having a systemic approach to life very much would have buried me. Life would have buried me in the course of planning my destination wedding with the love of my life, who you can see in the back corner there of the podcast screen here. Life would have buried me in the course of burying my mother, because that was very hard to do emotionally, but it also left me with being the executor of her estate, which was its own, and still is, its own additional challenge. And I have two companies, both of whom are growing and both of whom have a lot of activity that I had planned myself into because I love the work that I do and wanted to do that work. But life happens, right? So the question becomes, like, how do you respond to it? So this is actually not going to be a podcast about me and my journey and all those things. You can obviously follow me on social media for content about that, but I wanted to introduce that topic because I want you to know that this is not an academic discussion. This is real life. I bring you here on the podcast, not just my own personal experiences and growth, but the strategies that we use to help our clients, the strategies that I have been helping thousands of lawyers across the country work on and work into their lives so that they can crush chaos in their own lives. And that's what I'm here to help you do as well. So we're going to talk about today the burnout avoidance plan. So 5 strategies in order to do that. First one sounds like the antidote to something I just said a few moments ago. So hear me out when I say the first thing you have to do is systematize and delegate, right? Systematizing and delegating is not just a reactive thing, right? It is a way of being, and systematizing and delegating early. So one of the things that we have to do when we think about the issue of burnout is that too many things are on our plate. We have to think about the idea that as we expand our plate, we don't want to ever cut off a supply, right? We don't want to say not taking new clients. We don't want to say not open for new speaking engagements. We don't want to say not open to expanding our C-suite. Those things take time, but those things are also opportunities to expand wealth and opportunity in the firm. So how do you say yes to the things that matter while also saying no to the things that will stop you from achieving growth? And that happens through the process of systematizing. Okay. So that means you should always be in a state of documenting repeatable processes for everything that you do. Before you get to it needing to be a system, it is a system just by virtue of you having done it. If you did it once, you had a system for doing it. You might not know what that system is. You might not have a step-by-step 1, 2, 3 in this order game plan, but you do have a system for how to do things, and we want you to get into the habit of documenting those things early. The other thing is delegation. Now, delegation is something that even the highest achievers struggle with. And when we say delegate, we're not talking about delegating tasks here. We're talking about delegating responsibility and authority. Delegating authority means it is somebody else's problem to solve, which means they may solve it in a way that you don't agree with. And that is something that you have to learn to be okay with. You have to learn to let other people occupy the spaces where problems exist that will need to be solved, so that, yes, there'll be times where you're still consulted, but you're consulted as an advisor. You're consulted as somebody who has a vision that someone else is going to bring into place, especially when you start talking about working with a C-suite, right? Their charge is to bring forth your vision, but you want to get into the habit of seeing the people who are bringing forth your vision as their own little visionaries, right? They have a vision for the how. You have a vision for the what. They have a vision for the how. And you've got to systematize that early. And the way you do that is by delegating responsibility and delegating authority for them to do that. That means you need to start making yourself less necessary on an ongoing basis. Anytime you have a little niggle in your mind that says, oh, I'm so annoyed that I have to be bothered with this, I want you to see that as valuable feedback for you to get into the habit of saying, yeah, this needs to get off my plate permanently, right? How can we do that? So that could be anything from, why do I have to be the one who signs this contract, right? There should be other people besides me who can sign contracts. Why do I have to be the person who reviews these types of documents, right? I should have high level people who can enter into contracts and agreements that I might or might not enter into, asking questions that I might or might not enter into. And more often than not, when the answer is, I don't know that I trust this person to do that yet, more often than not, what ends up happening is we just leave it there, right? We don't go to the next step of, do I need a higher level person, right? Meaning hard conversation. Do I not have the level and the caliber of talent at the places where I need it in order to truly be a CEO? Or it might be, I have the talent, I just haven't enabled that person, right? I haven't created the environment where people can go to that person instead of me. I haven't created the environment where people can occupy the space because I haven't given them responsibility. I haven't given them authority. Or maybe I gave them responsibility, but without the ultimate authority. So they always feel like they have to come back to me. So things boomerang, right? It gets off my plate, but then it comes back because I ultimately have to have the final say so. That final say so that you are attached to is much more about your ego, far more often than not, than it is about truly getting to the things that need to happen. Because what you will find is when your company starts to slow down, when you stop seeing the same level of rapid growth that you were, almost invariably, there is someone at the helm, more often than not you, who is not giving over, or you are giving over to people who similarly struggle with delegation, right? The fact that you might be like well seasoned now at giving things over to other people does not mean that if you have hired a brilliant person, that person might not also struggle with giving over responsibility. In fact, sometimes people will convince themselves, oh, we don't need to hire another person because I got this. What they really need to do is they really have to say, I could have this, but we would be faster and better if I had more people doing other things. And then they just micromanage into the point where they become necessary. So you might have that problem. Other people around you might have that problem, but you don't get out of that problem without systematizing and delegating early. All right. Strategy number 2 of our burnout avoidance plan is setting boundaries around your time. Now, this is a biggie, and this one is oftentimes very challenging because when we talk about boundaries around your time, it's not so much the delegation, like what goes off your plate, but it's what stays in your plate and what stays in a frame, right? You are setting a frame and you are requiring people to operate within your frame. And that is very challenging for a lot of people because a lot of people are, I want my problem solved now. And they're used to having unfettered access to you because for most lawyers, most law firm CEOs, they are chief problem solver in command, especially when the company first gets started. So what ends up happening is as the problems unfold, you want them solved right away because if you don't solve them right away, oftentimes they don't get solved or they get worse. So you want to be the person that, everyone goes to, jumps, calls for, involves, etc. But what ends up happening in that scenario is your time then becomes everyone else's time. So the time that you start being productive is before everyone gets to work or after everyone has left. And that's something you want to avoid. Like you want to be able to set your day and reasonably stick to it. Yes, there are going to be times where some emergency comes up, but far more often than not, when you have a lot of pushing and pulling and you're yanked in 1,000 different directions and you set a plan for your day and you didn't get to but 5% of it, that is not because you just have a highly emergent office, right? I remember when somebody said that to me, and the very first time I heard that from a client, I said, well, tell me what's going on in the company that's happening. They're like, well, so-and-so got arrested and so-and-so, their child was abducted and this person had a restraining order. And then this person, the decedent passed away as we were preparing the will. And, they were giving all of these legal problems. And I said, well, who are the legal strategists on your team that are entrusted to solve legal problems? Well, yes, I have lawyers, but like I'm the most seasoned. So I'm the person who, and I said, well, there's your problem right there, right? You decided that you needed to be the person to solve legal problems, which means you didn't staff up to make sure that there's somebody who can deal with these problems when you're not there, right? You invited your team to come to you anytime that there's a legal problem. I used to tell people all the time, I was like, listen, if I'm on vacation and a client dies, they'll be dead when I get back. Now, I am being somewhat flip when I say that, but I mean, it really does make the point that is that really an emergency? Or are there circumstances, consequences that we will have to deal with that will still be the real consequence when I get back and am able to deal with it? Far more often than not, we decide that something can't wait for us. And we decide that as a result of the belief that, one, our value proposition is tethered to being the person who solves the problem. And two, if we don't solve the problem right away, the problem's going to get worse. Far more often than not, that is not the case. But what happens because we make ourselves indispensably available to people is that we can't get to our work and what we have planned because we are solving other people's problems all day, right? Other people's problems should be just that, the problem of other people, not you. Okay. So when we talk about setting boundaries for your time, I want you to think about having an open floor plan. And I've talked about this before on the podcast, right? I do not have an open door plan. My door is not open. Do not barge yourself into my door. You're not welcome here. And I'm very clear about that. Doesn't mean that you're not ever welcome here, right? I have a process for you to ping me, tell me that you have a problem, tell me what the nature of the problem is. We can absolutely find a time to connect. But far more often than not, finding a time to connect does not mean we connect in the instance that you want. And that is okay because I said so, right? Because just as you have deadlines and things to get done, I have deadlines and things to get done. And if I can't get to them, I can't be as highly productive as I need to be. But the beautiful thing is that if we do set a time, that time is allocated to you the same way that time was allocated to whomever when you pinged me and asked for some of my time. I.e., you have an open floor, right? That's a time where there are no email notifications going off. You know, got my cell phone here. What happens? The cell phone is going face down, right? It is on mute. It is not on vibrate. It is not on, so people can't call me. It is off during that time period. The door is closed during that time period. You have me unfettered. You are entitled to that just as every other person that I give time to. So when you give people that level of respect and authority with your time, not only do they feel more special, but they take better use of it, right? They don't just show up with, okay, I got this. Let me wander around the plantation. Cause I'll tell people, look, you got 30 minutes. We got 30 minutes. If you want to spend 29 of them telling me what the nature of the problem is and then give me 1 minute to tell you what I would do with it, we can do that. If you have 15 problems and you want to take 2 minutes per problem, 1 minute for you to tell me what the problem is and 1 minute for me to respond, we can do that. But we have 30 minutes. That 30 minutes is not expanding. So use it wisely, right? And you will be surprised how much people start to use your time and value it. And you ultimately hold that frame for people and they learn how to do that for themselves with others as well. They become more productive because of how you model productivity for them. All right. Strategy number 3, prioritize revenue driving activity. Now, this is particularly important in a law firm, right? A lot of people do not have a mindset that money is the most important thing that causes them to be in business. And that is okay, right? We are not here to challenge your mindset around what you personally value. You're entitled to value money as the number one thing. You're entitled to not have it on the list at all. The problem is the business values money, whether you do or not. So you do have to prioritize revenue generating activity, even if you want to spend 90% of your personal time as a lawyer in business doing pro bono work. Why do you have to prioritize revenue? Because the business eats revenue, right? The business is going to eat whether you prioritize money or not. So it's really important that the things that will drive revenue in is where you spend your time. That is your highest and best use of time to figure out how to increase the money that you have, make the best use of the money that is within the doors, right? Making the best investments, getting the highest return on your investment. These are things like legal strategy, rainmaking, team leadership. These are things that are going to exponentially expand the pie. And a lot of lawyers, because they don't feel adept at those areas, they feel, well, the way that I make the most money is by billing the most hours, right? So they think I have a high hourly rate or can justify a higher hourly rate just because my name is on the building. So I can make the most money for the company by billing the most. The problem is if you get into the habit of jumping yourself back into being a lawyer as opposed to a CEO, you will always stay there. And you should not be the best lawyer in your law firm. Okay. I don't care how talented you are. I don't care how great your reputation. I don't care how many clients you've served. I don't care what the marketing says. You should not be the best lawyer in the building. Why? Because you are split between lawyering and other. If you have a great lawyer who is even one little bit lesser than you are, but they're not also spending their time as a CEO, they're inherently better because they have more time and attention and effort to devote to the lawyering than to the CEOing, which is your job, right? You are out of your job when you jump yourself back into those other goals. So you really want to focus your time and attention there. Okay. Now, the next strategy number 4, is you want to invest in well-being as a big strategy. People talk to me all the time about how they don't have time to fill in the life activity. I don't have time to see my kids, sleep with my spouse, get to the gym, eat a healthy diet, right? And as somebody who did not prioritize what I ate and eating healthy for the first 45 years of my life, I can assure you that I knew that that was an excuse when it came out of my mouth, and I said it with my chest, but it was still an excuse, right? We have to make time for the things that matter. And the more you put into your schedule that feeds you and fuels you, the better you will be for achieving the other things that are on your schedule. And frankly, the more you will enjoy the things, right? So you have to get into a habit of saying that there are certain things that cannot come off the schedule. They might be shifted around, right? We might have to figure out, are we better to work out first thing in the morning, or better to work out after lunch, or better to work out in the evening? Whatever that is for you, you have to figure that out. But put it on your schedule, right? Do not start allowing yourself to buy the story that you can discount sleep, okay? Sleep is not negotiable. Sleep is a necessity, right? I used to tell my team all the time, I was like, how is it that I don't have a single bathroom break on my calendar? Like literally, I had a wonderful executive assistant. Shout out to Nina Eads. Nina is now happily retired and living in the lovely world of Montana. But when Nina was my assistant, sometimes we would get booked and busy, and I'd be like, I need to like guest on at least 15 podcasts this month. And I want to be on at least 2 stages, and like, we got to do at least 2 virtual events, and we got to get these clients. And right where I'm chasing and I'm hustling and I'm doing the thing. And then I looked up one day and literally she had scheduled me from like 7:30 in the morning to like 8:00 at night. I mean, like there was no break. And I was like, Nina, when am I going to pee? Like literally, do I need to like bring my catheter to work? Is that what you're telling me? And she was like, oh, I forgot. I was like, yeah. So here, peeing is fundamental. I can't write that out of the operating system as much as I would like to take that off of my list of things to do. I can't, especially at this age, right? But definitely not one of those things that I recommend that anybody try to take off the schedule. Healthy eating, sleeping, getting fresh air, walking, taking care of your body, taking care of your mind, all of those things need to go on your schedule. So put them on your schedule and make them non-negotiable, right? You would never say to a court, hey, judge, I know I have a court appearance at 9:00, but I have this new client that's coming in and I would rather take in his money than show up for this case that I'm not getting paid on. So I just won't be there. Right? You might want to say that. Believe me, I understand if you want to say that, but you're not going to say that, right? Because you have a responsibility to that client and the court does not give you the option to make it non-negotiable or to make it negotiable. So you have to treat yourself the same way. And I assure you, this is one of the things that will help you to avoid burnout. One of the things that a lot of people will tell me about that particular strategy, by the way, is I really want to just sit and watch TV, but I don't have time, right? And what ends up happening is, I'll sit down and plan to watch TV with my spouse, but as soon as I do, I start thinking about all the things at work. you have to practice getting into the habit of filling the space with your activity, right? And that means when you are watching TV, don't just sit there and let your mind wander and accept that frustration. Download it and deal with it as soon as it comes into your mind, right? If you start to do that enough, what you will find is you will recognize that there is a time and a place for the things that come into your mind, right? So your mind starts going off. I'm watching what's happening on the Real Housewives of wherever. And then all of a sudden, oh crap. I have a motion that I didn't draft. When am I going to draft that motion? Oh God, client's going to be calling tomorrow. I don't know what I'm going to do. Oh my God. Oh yeah, I got to do a legal research brief with it. Right. And then you're down the rabbit hole. So instead, you're watching your TV show. And then all of a sudden, I got to draft a motion. All right, put it on the calendar for Thursday. Right. Get it out of here and on your calendar so that it has a place to live. Just knowing that it will get done oftentimes is enough to relieve the tension. Now, the tension is still going to be there because you are well rehearsed at it, but you start to train your brain of, we have a place for that, right? Something comes up, we have a place for that. And then at some point, you'll get to the point of something comes up, I already have a place for that, right? And then there are some things that you don't need a place for right now, right? It's never going to leave your mind until it's done, so write it down. Just jot it on a sheet of paper and you will figure out when the movie is over, when you are done with having friends over, when you've left the movie theater, whatever it is, you will figure out a place for that activity to go. But when you start doing that enough, what you'll find is that anytime something has a place to go somewhere, you will be putting it there proactively. So you don't have those thoughts. The thoughts it'll still come up of, oh, I got court next week. Yeah. Okay. But we're not at next week. Right now we're watching the movie. Right. Okay. And then the fifth and final strategy of our avoidance burnout plan, or our burnout avoidance plan, even though I do think you should get burned out on avoidance because avoidance can be a very unhealthy strategy, right? But right now we're talking about burnout avoidance, right? If we want to avoid burnout, the last thing that I would recommend is that you build a support and accountability network. Okay. And this means having other people that are there to fuel you. Now, this is not like a coffee clutch, right? This is not, oh, let me find some other people who are at the same stage of business that I am, and we can all talk about the things that we want to do and wax philosophical. No. Right? This is support and accountability. Accountability looks like someone saying, when do you agree that you're going to have this done? And then they diary it the same way that you do. And then they ask you, hey, did you get that done? Right? So it is holding you accountable to what you say you're going to do. But it also is something that you can galvanize around coaching, right? And so one of the things that we talk about here at Law Firm Mentor a lot is the fact that even though most people, not all, but most lawyers find us and say, I want one-to-one coaching, right? That's all that I need. I don't need anything group oriented. I don't want to be around other people. I just want to be me and you. This dysfunction that we have fallen into, where we actually believe that we don't need other people, is something that as a society is a problem and is causing a whole host of issues, right? I'm sure you all have heard about the loneliness epidemic. It's beyond that, right? There is something to be said for what happens when you put a whole bunch of bright minds into one space and little thoughts, little microcosms of ideas start to percolate in the ether, and you can draw from that what you will. So that has its own value system. So you need to have that for the inspiration piece that will keep you thinking outside of your own space, especially when you start talking to people that don't just practice in your practice area, because the way that a criminal defense attorney deals with a challenge is different than the way that a business attorney deals with a challenge, which is different than the way that a franchise attorney deals with a challenge, which is different than the way an immigration attorney deals with the challenge, right? Different size staff, different ideas of how to assemble people, different systems for how to get work done, right? Different workflows, all those things, right? That I think people can understand. But what we oftentimes don't understand is that when somebody who is not your competitor, who is in your space, doing the same type of thing that you are, and that person then can say to you, hey, you said you were going to, it isn't just a calling out, but it's also a calling in, right? It's an invitation to think more holistically about what you committed to and why. And oftentimes having that in a peer network can be highly motivating because it isn't somebody that you look up to, right? Who is somebody that you see as aspirational, inspirational. You need that, right? Because that oftentimes gives us something to reach for. But you also need, boots on the ground, people who are right beside you, who might be in a different state, in a different stage of their career than you are, but who are pushing toward the same thing. So all of these collective strategies put together make for the avoidance of burnout in a way that is holistic and healthy for you as a CEO. And it's something that you have to create a systemic approach to in order to ensure that you stay growing and that you never stop growing. All right, everyone. You have been listening to another episode of the Crushing Chaos with Law Firm Mentor podcast. I am Allison Williams, your host, and I will see you on our next episode.